To my sprint number 1 and 2 individual progress update. My name is Patricio Calderon. I'm from the group GradChain. So we will start by breaking down the labor of the last sprint. So basically we have been working in 5 features, basically setting up the whole Flutter app, doing some themes and responsive layout, and then basically going over the Firebase setup, designing some login and signing up UI, uh, actually getting to authenticate uh, through the Firebase database with the login screen and sign up, and finally persisting authentication state. All of the features are complete except for persisting authentication. It's still in progress. I was working by myself, and this is basically the minutes I've been working on for this last sprint. So now I'm going to show you a feature demo of what I was working on for this sprint. I'm going to start with features 1 and 2. And we're going to go take a deeper look into my IDE to discuss my code. So basically starting up with setting up theming and responsive layout. We started off by creating the Flutter web application that we were going to use. So it came with all these different folders for Android, iOS, Mac OS. I was only using the web basically and the library because I didn't need to do any configuration on iOS or Android since it's only going to be a web application. And after that, I started doing some theming and building up the responsive layout. So basically, how this started was I created some folders for the responsive layout. As you can see here, basically this is a stateless widget that takes into account the screen size of the device where the Flutter application is running. And then this is a value that it is stored in another folder where we store the dimensions, just so that we don't have to use it, so that we don't have to repeat this value all the time. We just store it somewhere else, and we can just call it here. Basically, if the screen is greater than a certain size, it will display a web layout or a mobile layout. And then for the mobile layout and the web screen layout, it's just a normal scaffold, which means that it's stated here. It's just creates a visual scaffold. So basically, just this builds the design for the material application, and we just put some text in the center just to know that we're in the mobile or the web screen layout. Basically, these are the same. And then we started working here on our main.dart folder. As you can see, this was our first attempt. Basically, when the widget is first built, so when the app starts here, it would check if it's going to be a mobile screen layout or a mobile screen layout. But we ended up using a login screen directly, but it implements the responsive layout. So in this case, let me show you so we can see what that means. Basically, responsive is going to adjust the screen size. If this were to run on an Android or iOS simulator, it would actually change in size depending on the screen layout. And finally, we did some theming for the colors, just some constants that we're basically using most of it throughout the demo. Then we have the Firebase setup. So that would look like this. Basically, we created a Firebase Pro project. This one's called Instagram clone, and we started with the type of signing method that was going to be used, email, password. We created the Firestore database. We actually edited some of the rules so that we can test this, so we can read and write on the database, and finally this storage. All of this was then set up in the Flutter app. I used an extension for this, which is PubSpec, which basically helped me to get the latest dependencies for Cloud Firestore, um, Firebase authentication, that's for the login, Firebase Core, which is for the communications between the Flutter app and Firebase, and the storage, which will come in handy when storing images. And then some of the other um, some of the other the setup that I had to do was basically for the web. I had to get the API key. I got that from the Cloud Firestore. When I created it, it gave me an API key, an API ID, and all of this. Just copied it and put it here so that it can actually communicate with the Firebase. And then we have to, since it's an asynchronous application, we have to use this to initialize the app in Firebase. So that's for the Firebase part of the authentication. Then I went into the login and sign up UI. Basically, what it looks like is I created a folder for my screens. This would be like my views. And then I started with the login screen. Basically, it's just a stateful widget which has a class for the state. It has some controllers for the email and the password text box that I used here. This is basically for the constructor. So basically, this allows me to, when the user enters a value here, I can actually get it with invoking this variable .text. Then for the UI, I basically just did some editing on the widget build function, and basically just using some UI parameters for example, the edge insets for making the app appear symmetric on both sides. So as you can see, there's a padding here and also here. It's symmetric. Some cross-axis alignment so that everything is in the center, but in the x-axis, not in the y-axis. And then basically just using different containers for the different things that show up in the screen. For example, I have the text field input. This is a container. This would be this. And then some boxes to create some spacing between the containers. And then just doing some setup for the bottom for the login, basically like when the user taps on it. And just centering it, aligning it, giving it some padding, being symmetric, some shape decoration, a border radius, using some other containers to make it look a little bit more spaced out. And then basically that's for the login screen, and the sign up screen, it's pretty much the same, but here we have a couple more text editing controllers. You can actually get a look of how that looks here. Screen. So yeah, it's just like the login screen, but then we have more controllers. Oh, and also for the text editing controllers, I actually used this widget. I created a text simple widget, which basically, because I was going to use this a bunch of times, this helps me save time by basically establishing some parameters for the text field input. For example, this one, which is really helpful, it helps me determine when the text needs to be obscured. For example, when typing a password. And basically, yep, just using some decoration to like get some text in there. Like the overall style that is going to be used like throughout the app. So all the text inputs look the same. And then after that, you can go to the Firebase login and sign up authentication. For that part, basically what I did was just create some authentication methods. So here we have the sign up user function. It requires this parameters, and then it checks if any of them are empty, basically. And then just going over to the username, just assigning it to like the collection that is going to be the document in the collection that is going to be stored in Firebase. So basically how that looks like this. We have a collection of users, and I can store different parameters, including a photo and basically other variables, and the user ID document. So we can actually go ahead and show you how that will work on the app. So basically I can just create so basically what this would do is I also forgot about this. Basically this allows you to select an image, and that image would then be stored in the bucket in Firestore storage. That is handled in this storage method, basically just grabbing a file, turning it into a uint8 list, and using the reference to Firebase storage to create a document inside of Fire storage, which is called profile pics, and then the image is saved to the specific user by its UID. That image can be then downloaded. Basically, how that would look like is we also implemented a progress indicator. Now that it's saved, I can actually go into authentication. I can see I got the new email for that user. It's user ID. And that user, you can find it here. And this is the photo URL, which is stored in Firebase storage. This is going to help me later on when I need to download the GradChain files. It's going to allow me to like view them and show them in the different accounts. And then finally, you can actually see here in the storage that we now have 4. So this is the one for this is the one for Dan. The UID starts with 6CD. It would be this picture, 6CD. It's the same UID. And that's the demo for my application. Thank you.